Hi everyone, Dr. Vaughn. By request, we're going to look at problems 12 and 13 from section 3.3. So here we have the exact value of sine s equals 1/2, where s is the angle that's between pi over 2 and pi radians. So pi over 2 is 90 degrees, pi is 180 degrees, so this is in the second quadrant. What you really need to know about this is that it's in the second quadrant. And so we need to find the reference angle in that second quadrant whose sine value is turns out to be 1/2. Now, I don't know if you can actually see my cursor on here, but I'm going to think about the angle in the first quadrant whose sine is 1/2. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So the opposite side is 1, the hypotenuse is 2, and the adjacent side over here then would be square root of 3. So this is the angle that's the smaller of the ones. It's the 30-degree angle, or in radian values, that's pi over 6. So pi over 6 is the angle in the first quadrant, such that sine of pi over 6 is equal to 1/2. So now when I go over into the third quadrant on the opposite side, I need to go backwards from pi, backwards from 180 by that 30 degrees, or backwards from pi by pi over 6 to get the angle that's also got a height of 1 and is root 3 away it's just in the negative x direction instead of the positive x direction. So my answer over here is going to be pi minus pi over 6, which is 6 pi over 6 minus pi over 6, or 5 pi over 6. So I'll go here, I'll use my fraction tool, I'll do 5, and then the pi, and then over 6 in the radians, and that should be the right answer. All right, so, and then we'll look at question 13. Okay, it looks to be pretty much the similar kind of question. There might be more than one answer here. Now we're looking at the interval that goes from minus 2 pi. All right, so that's the same reference angle as 0. It's just that we've rotated around, clockwise. So minus 2 over pi, and then we're going to rotate from that 0 all the way around back to 0, and then back to pi after that. So this is going to contain one full rotation of the circle, and then half again rotation of the circle. And we want to have this condition that tan squared is equal to s. Now notice that the tangent is being squared to get the square root of 3. So the tangent itself could be positive or negative. So the square root of this, the tangent itself, is equal to the square root of 3. Now, similar to what I did with those kind of reference angles up in the first quadrant, I'm going to think about the angle in the first quadrant whose tangent is the square root of 3. So tangent is opposite over adjacent. So that has a height of square root of 3 and an adjacent side of 1. So that's the 60-degree angle, or pi over 3 radians. So that's the reference angle in the first quadrant is pi over 3. So now I need to find all of the pi over 3 angles that are reference angles between minus 2 pi and pi, because those will all be plus or minus square root of 3, and plus or minus square root of 3, when I square it, will give me positive 3. All right, so the one over in starting at minus 2 pi, which again is equivalent to the angle 0, but now I'm going to start going around in the counterclockwise direction. So we're going to get minus 2 pi plus pi 6. So the first one that we pick up on the negative 2 pi just is pi 6 up from that. So minus 2 pi is negative 12 pi over 6 plus pi over, I'm sorry, I'm saying pi over 6. It's pi over 3. Pi over 3 is 60 degrees. So minus 2 pi is minus 6 pi over 3, and then I'm going to add pi over 3. So the first one is going to be minus 5 pi over 3. Okay, now I'm supposed to separate these by commas. Now I'm going to go over into the second quadrant. I'm still on these negative angles, but now I'm in the second quadrant. So that's between minus 3 pi over 2 and minus pi. And so I'm going to go minus pi, and then I'm going to go clockwise. So back up between minus 3 pi over 2, or minus pi plus a negative pi over 3. So minus pi minus pi over 3. That's going to give me minus 4 pi over 3. And that is in the second quadrant. You know, if you start at 0 and you rotate more than pi in the clockwise direction. So minus 4 pi over 3 is the next one. Oh, it shouldn't matter whether I put the minus out in front or I put it up in the numerator. Okay, the next one after that is now down into the third quadrant. We're still dealing with these negative angles. And so we've rotated around to minus pi, and now I want to go back down into the third quadrant by pi over 3 by 60 degrees. So I'm going to do minus pi, but this time do plus pi over 3 to do that counterclockwise rotation back into the third quadrant. So that's minus 3 pi over 3 plus pi over 3 is minus 2 pi over 3. All right, now we're back over into the fourth quadrant, and in the fourth quadrant, we're actually just going pi over 3 down in the clockwise direction, or in the negative, rotation. So that's going to be minus pi over 3. I don't have to do any adjustment for that one. Okay, now we're back up into the first quadrant. Now I'm dealing with the angles from 0 over to pi. So the first one in that first quadrant is just the positive pi over 3. And finally, we're going to go over into the second quadrant again, but this time we have positive angles. So we're looking at the pi minus pi over 3. So 3 pi over 3 minus pi over 3 is 2 pi over 3. And I think that's it, because once you get over into the third quadrant, again, you're bigger than pi, and now you've escaped outside of this interval that you've given. So let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's check our answers, see what they say. All right, looks like we got it right. All right, this has been Dr. Vaughn. 2 questions from homework 3.3. As always, put your requests for more videos up in the discussion thread, and I'd be happy to make them. Talk to you next time.